Hello and welcome. So we are needing to talk about, everyone's been saying about whether Bitcoin can become a world reserve currency. Seems to be the kind of question on everyone's lips. And I am going to have some news for you. Some good, some bad, but stay tuned for exactly what my overall opinion is later on. Also, don't forget, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button on this video if you like it. If you don't, hit the dislike button. It kind of lets me know whether I should or shouldn't be doing more of these videos. But anyway, let's get into it. So firstly, I just want to cover off what on earth is a reserve currency. This is kind of probably the most important question to ask. Can Bitcoin become the world's currency, the one that everyone resorts to? So firstly, what is a reserve currency? A reserve currency from Investopedia, so this is going to be legit. A reserve currency is a large quantity of currency maintained by central banks and other major financial institutions to prepare for investments, transactions, and international debt obligations, or to influence their domestic exchange rate, which basically means that right now we have the US as the world reserve currency. And this means that a lot of different commodities, such as oil and gold, as you can see here, are priced in reserve currency. So the whole advantage is to kind of having your currency as the world reserve is that when, let's say, Germany is selling lots of stuff to Australia, Germany says, I'll send you $400. That's not very much for two governments, but you see my whole point. They say, look, this is going to be in dollars, and then Aussies say, okay, well, I know from dollars, this is how many Aussie dollars I'm going to be getting. So, and it all kind of came about when a lot of people came together to this nice little resort. You might not know what the heck I'm talking about, but this is the Bretton Woods resort. Let's go back. This is obviously not the resort that everyone is interested in. It's actually this is where everybody got together. 44 different people all came together to kind of talk about, okay, what are we going to be doing? And it ended up in everyone signing and saying, you know what? Let's make the US dollar the world reserve currency. So let's have a quick look. What are we looking at? I'm zooming out here. So ever since, 1940s, this is where these 44 different countries came together and they were analyzing who is going to be the world reserve currency. One thing to note here, guys, the reason why they chose the US was who was at war during 1940s. All of Europe, all of the most powerful countries were all at war. And where are you going to put your most precious stuff? Well, you don't want to keep them in your country if you get invaded. So they all moved all of their gold over to the USA. And they said, well, look, since you have all of our gold and we want to access our money, which is backed by X amount of gold, why don't you just keep all of the gold and all of the money? And then anytime we want some money, we know we have dollars to back our gold. This didn't really go too well. But looking at this is the overall chart of the US dollar strength. So we have seen ever since 1998 and then again 1999, these key areas of resistance and kind of support, should we say. There's a lot going on here on these smaller time frames, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But you can see we're kind of pretty much hovering at the moment at quite a high, strong dollar, strong level of actually influence of the dollar globally. But here is where everybody met up, all these little flags. Here we go. Peru, Panama, the UK, pretty much all of Europe. But anyway, this is where the Bretton Woods system came about. One thing that I do want to actually highlight, and I'm going to take a little bit of a detour here, is a warship. Let's have a look at this warship. Nice, hey? This is not actually of any relevance too much to whether Bitcoin can become a world reserve currency, but more so, this is what France were like. They shipped it, or they drove their warship over to New York when we fell off of the gold standard. When Nixon decided to take the US dollar off of the gold standard, Bob. France sent a warship. Also, I believe UK did the same as well, because they were like, hey, look, now give us our gold back. And they were like, oh, sorry, we can't do that. So the US didn't want to give their gold back. And so consequently, France was like, all right, I'm gonna send a warship over. This is the exact ship they brought, which is absolutely kind of crazy. But kind of having a look at some of the differences that we see between Bitcoin and now being kind of compared to as like a digital gold. What we're seeing is, I guess, like there are the benefits of it being, you could say, uncorruptible in a way. Like one of the benefits of the US being on the gold standard, or no, sorry, taking itself off of the gold standard, was that whenever there's debt and the US is in debt and debt is measured in dollars, well, you can just print more dollars, right? And then that way you don't really have to worry about your debt because you can just print more. But if it's measured in gold and, there's only a certain amount of gold, this is really kind of what happened during the 70s. So I think, with Bitcoin, having these very much kind of separate is a very good thing for everybody else. But the controlling interest, which is the US, are never going to let this happen. Let me show you a couple video clips here. So one is about why the Bitcoin will be the world reserve currency. Now, you can kind of make of this what you will. This is an interview.
People like me believe that Bitcoin is actually a competitor to central banks, and that it will ultimately be the reserve currency of the world. The cool part is it's not just going to be for governments. Everybody can own it. So it's this like ultimate check on government power. And that's what you observe today when you look around the world and see the tens of millions of people who use Bitcoin in Cuba, in Nigeria, in Argentina, in Iran, in China, wherever. They're able to have a little bit of freedom, regardless of how tyrannical their government is. They're able to take their work.
And that is the point of having freedom. Now, I know America loves to claim freedom, home of the free, land of the brave, I want to say. But this freedom comes at a cost for everybody else. And I'm going to show you this. This is actually from Drake Chan's channel. Let's have a look at what happens when someone tries to take the freedom and, most importantly, the control away.
Saddam Hussein announced they would no longer be selling oil in US dollars, only in euros. Which on the surface is an innocent change. What's the big deal? The big deal is that Iraq has the 5th largest petroleum reserves in the world, and in the 2000s, it had become the world's 5th largest oil producer. So when Hussein decided to start selling oil in euros instead of dollars, the US wasn't too happy. By February 2003, he had sold over 3 billion barrels of oil for 26 billion euros. A month later, the US invaded Iraq.
My fellow citizens.
There we go. So that was number one.
American and coalition.
Let's have a little look at what happened in Venezuela.
Coincidentally, Venezuela also has large oil reserves. In fact, they have the largest proven oil reserves in the world. At the time, Hugo Chavez was in charge of Venezuela as the dictator president. But Chavez, a diehard anti-American leader, was about to make the same grave mistake that Saddam Hussein made. He planned to start selling oil for euros instead of the mighty American dollar. Well, we can't have that now, can we? So in 2002, the US backed a coup against Chavez, which ultimately failed, but it crippled the country. Venezuela and Iraq. Libya has the largest oil reserves in Africa, and they weren't doing that bad. They did a great job managing all those oil revenues, building up a 143-ton gold reserve according to WikiLeaks. They had the highest GDP per capita in Africa, and Libya was on track to become the most influential country in Africa.
Here's the kicker. Kicker.
Also similar to Venezuela and Iraq, Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, suggested all Muslim and African countries buy oil from Libya using a new currency backed by their giant gold reserves instead of US dollars.
Fatal mistake, guys. Fatal mistake. And this is kind of what I'm going to get at is when we're looking at a different country or a different currency being like brought into creation or used primarily as the world reserve currency, you have to think about all the advantages that the world reserve currency is going to lose and who controls that. And this is where I think, a lot of the issues come in where, there is massive currency manipulation. We see it happen in China all of the time. That's why I don't think the Chinese renminbi won't be a viable option. But let's just have a look slightly further at this here. So when we think about if America, or if Bitcoin, let's say, if Bitcoin is going to be a world reserve currency, let's think about how America might respond to that. Currently, America's very friendly. But what we've seen is when China didn't like the freedom that their people were having, and again, we have to consider if America, things start getting traded, commodities start getting traded in Bitcoin instead of in the US dollar, what are we going to have? We're going to have America do something very similar to what China's done. And this is where, I know that a lot of people are saying, even if China and US go to war, it's going to be fine because Bitcoin will be fine. But if there's a way that someone from the UK or from Europe can send money and help the opposition of, let's say, the US, if there is a way that money can be sent, so supplies can be bought, anything that helps the Chinese, regime in any way or any of their allies, that's going to be shut down immediately, irrespective of what it is. So if the US, they could have a massive ban on mining and also trading. Also, they can sanction banks. They can do a whole load of things, which I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of. They just think, well, if China and US go to war, or NATO and, Asia all go to war, we're going to have to use crypto. But what if you shut down the mining power? We saw a massive drop in the price of Bitcoin, whenever this did happen. We saw hash rate difficulty go up. So these are very, very much kind of tumultuous times that we would see for crypto and all of Bitcoin. And again, you can see this here. Bitcoin mining is banned in countries across the globe and threatening the future of crypto. Because if you cannot mine crypto, it's going to be bad. If you cannot have the validators, if the validators start being taken down for proof of stake, what they call protocols, you're going to have an issue. But for now, the US is very friendly. They are attracting a lot of Bitcoin miners. They are attracting, people who are supporting this network. But just now imagine that if US and China go to war over Taiwan, for example, the US are going to have to do everything in their power to make sure that there's no trade towards China. Anything that would help them would be shut down. So this is something that I think you have to consider. Overall, guys, there's kind of four main criteria that actually help a currency become the world reserve. It has to have fair value. It has to have wide circulation. You have to be able to go down to pretty much any country and be able to buy something. That will make it a world reserve. Also has to be massively accepted, which currently Bitcoin is not, and it has to be extremely stable, which again Bitcoin is not. You can't have the US dollar dropping by 70% in a couple months. That would just be disastrous. Imagine as Bitcoin drops by 5% per day. If I'm trying to buy some oil and I start the transaction and 3 hours later the guy's like, oh, you've got to send some more money because the price of oil has just gone up relative to Bitcoin, you'd be like, what the heck? So for now, it's not. We have to get a lot more supply. It has to be more stable. It has to be more widely accepted. So for now, I do not think that it will be. It doesn't fit those four criteria, unfortunately. But I do think there is merit in having a limited supply backing of a particular world reserve currency. It's always been, we've always had precious metals, we've always had gold, as the backing of a particular currency. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. What do you think? Personally, I think we're not there. We will not get there in the next probably 50 years. But I do think people will see it as an asset class that they can park some money in. World reserve currency, I don't think so, unfortunately. Anyway, that was my conclusion. Let me know, like the video, and I'll